All right, we are reading chapter 4 of Soldier's Heart, and it is entitled Bull Run. Make it stop now, Charlie thought, or thought he was thinking until he realized he was screaming it. Make it all stop now! Death was everywhere, nowhere. Bullets flew past him with evil little snaps and snickers as they cut through the air. Next to him, Massey's head suddenly left his body and disappeared, taken by a cannon round that went through an officer's horse, end over end before plowing through the ground. This can't be, he thought. I can't be here. This is all a mistake. It's a terrible mistake. I'm not supposed to be here. He'd forgotten to fire his musket. The officers had marched them out onto a field in perfect order and told them where to aim and fire. He'd raised his rifle, and then the whole world had come at him. The rebel soldiers were up a shallow grade 100 yards away, behind some fallen trees. They'd opened on Charlie and the others before anyone could even fire. It was like a blade cutting grain. He heard the bullets hitting the men, little thunk, slap, and saw men falling. Some of them screamed as they fell. Most of them were silent. Many were dead before they even hit the ground. Many were torn apart, hit 10, 12 or more times before they even had time to drop. The men left standing with Charlie fired, and then the survivors of that round reloaded and fired again. Charlie aimed in the general direction of the rebels and pulled his trigger, firing blind. The black powder smoke clouded from the rifles and the rebel guns on the hill, and it was impossible for him to see or understand anything around him. I don't know anything, Charlie thought. The words jerked through his mind before he thought them. Somebody screamed over the sound of the gunfire, and the man next to Charlie turned to the rear and began walking as calm as if he was going for a stroll in the park, his rifle at his right shoulder heft. Charlie followed him, dragging his own rifle along the ground. He must know something I don't know, he thought. He must have heard something. Was there a command? The man in front of him hadn't gone 4 steps before he was struck in the back several times and dropped on his face. Bullets filled the air. Charlie heard them going past his ears like horizontal hail. He decided to lie back down. If he didn't lie down, he'd be hit, ripped, torn to pieces. It was only slightly better down on the ground. He heard the same sounds, the same bullets, but the bodies in front of him protected him. He could hear the bullets hissing by. 2 bullets met directly in front of his eyes. They jammed together and fell to the ground as one. The sight was more horrifying than the death that he'd seen. How many bullets, he thought, would have to be flying around for 2 of them to collide in midair? Something jerked at his foot, pulling it sideways. He was sure he'd been hit, didn't see how it was possible to keep from being hit. But when he turned, he saw Lieutenant Olfson tugging at his leg. The officer had been hit in his left upper arm. He was holding a saber in his left hand and was jerking at Charlie with his right. Get up, boy, or to fall back. The cords in his neck bulged with the strain of screaming over the noise. Back? In good order, we're to fall back to the trees. Come on, son. Get up and move. Help some of the others. Somehow Charlie's arm worked to push himself off the ground. He stood and started walking when everything in him wanted to run. Started walking in good order, even when the lieutenant was hit in the chest and then in the head, and went down, obviously finished, but with the legs still moving, still pumping, still pushing the dying body around and around on the ground. Charlie continued walking, not running, even when his mind prayed to God, told God, demanded of God, I'm not supposed to see this, God. No person is supposed to see this. How can you let this happen? Charlie walked amid the explosions of shot and the ripping of bullets until he was clear of the smoke and saw other men walking with him. Impossible, he thought, that they could walk as they did, in rank, in good order. Impossible that they had lived, could have lived through what they had just come through. Many of the men crouched as they moved, as if in a heavy rain, and Charlie found himself doing the same. And when he was still some 20 yards from the line of trees ahead, he crouched more, and then he ran, could not stop himself from running, until he was there in the trees, a large maple at his back. And finally, sucking air until his lungs seemed to be on fire. Finally, he stopped and he leaned over, his hands on his knees, and he vomited, heaving until he was empty and then heaving more until he felt as if his stomach would come up, until he felt that his very soul would leave him. First battle. Perspective from a 14-year-old boy going through the Battle of Bull Run, the first official battle of the Civil War, and a Confederate victory. So the Confederacy will really shock the Union Army by being a much stronger force than they expected. They expected these to be little rebel forces, volunteer forces coming after them, and this will be a very, very well-trained, organized army coming after them. So Battle of Bull Run, first battle of the Civil War, and of course, one of our vocabulary words. Notice so much of the figurative language. It's on today's form. Notice so much of the figurative language that the author uses to really describe this battle, to really describe, we've got onomatopoeia and similes and metaphors, and we've got lots of personification about how the bullets are behaving and different areas of author's craft going on. So, all right, go and complete your form, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.